I Barely Got Here is a collection of stories and conversations based on 24 years in law enforcement. You have the right to be disturbed by some of the content or disagree with the viewpoints. Anything you hear can and will be dosed with sarcasm and dark humor. You have the right to know that discussions will often be graphic with language and themes that are intended for a mature audience. Do you understand your rights? Then buckle up, Buttercup. We're going 10-8. Hello and welcome back to I Barely Got Here. I'm your host, Kevin Booncher, and with me again, I got my friend Greg, who was with me, if you remember, back for episode number 9. We called that one Speed Bump. If you haven't listened to that one, it'd be a good one to give a listen to. So thanks for coming back, Greg. How you been?
Good, man. Good.
Good. Right on.
Just, enjoying the retired life.
As you should. You know, the one thing I did want to hit, and I when I listened to that last episode, you know, I talked about your buddy Ronnie, who helped me out so much with kind of getting going in the podcast and everything. And when I listened to it, I realized that we said what it was, but we really didn't say what it was about or anything at all. So if you can help me out with, what's it called again?
It's C10 Talk.
C10 Talk. And again, the host is Ronnie. And so what is a C10?
So a C10 is an older body-styled Chevy truck.
Okay.
The body styles that Ronnie really enjoys, it's like the 67 to the 72s. And then he has another podcast. It's OSB or OBS. I can't remember, dyslexia. But it's the older body style trucks that go from, I believe it's 87 to 98.
Okay.
But yeah, basically he just talks about anything there is to do with the C10 trucks.
Okay.
Very informative. He talks to a lot of builders in the business, goes to a lot of truck shows, talks to people that build their own trucks. Just an all around, very, very knowledgeable guy when it comes to those trucks. So give it a listen. He's a good dude.
Yeah, totally. If you're into that C10 culture, definitely give him a listen. And you say you go to those car shows sometimes. He's kind of like a local celebrity.
He is a celebrity. I'm trying to get him to hire me as like a personal assistant, like manager, because he has a serious case of ADD, and it's just like squirrel. He goes off. Squirrel. It's crazy. He needs to be focused. But again, he's a really good guy, and he knows his shit. So
right on.
Give it a listen.
Ronnie, if you're listening, again, thanks. I appreciate it, and I will not give you a yay or nay on hiring Greg as a personal assistant.
Whatever.
Anyway, the other thing that you and I were talking about was I just had an episode a couple episodes back with John, my buddy John, where we talked about the Rick Chance homicide. I think that was episode 10. And you were actually in CIB for a couple of years. And as we were talking about the details with John, I said, hey, sometimes these other detectives have to help you out with these larger investigations and everything. And we had discussed that you had gotten pulled into doing things frequently just based on kind of what your assignment was. So can you kind of touch on some of that again?
Yeah. Early in my career, I made the decision to go to CIB, which is the Criminal Investigations Bureau. I was just, as a younger officer, I really wanted to learn like better investigation skills and whatnot. So I tested for it. I got picked, and I went into property crimes, and I was basically just investigating, burglaries, thefts, and that type of stuff. But when when the bigger cases came along, like the Rick Chance, I wasn't in the bureau during that time. But anytime like a big homicide came by, I mean, really any big investigation, anybody that was in the bureau, they just basically pulled you off whatever you were doing, and you went and helped them.
Sure. And
they would assign you different things. And, the property detectives were kind of thought as, the lowlifes. I shouldn't say lowlifes, but, the lower level detective.
Right. And I wanted to touch on that. I'm glad you brought it back up. That's kind of where you always start off. If you go into CIB, though, don't you almost always start off as a property dick, and then you have an opportunity to test into the more, I guess, the higher felony areas from there?
Yeah, you kind of get your feet wet there, and then you have the opportunity to move into other investigation parts of the, I don't even know what they call them, but, different investigation types.
Right. Robbery, sex assault, homicide, all those.
But yeah, pretty much. For the most part, everybody starts off in property, and then they work their way up.
Right.
So. Well,
it kind of, part of the reason I bring that up is because, when you talk to people that want to get into law enforcement, a lot of times you're like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to be a homicide detective, or, I want to be a SWAT cop. And they don't understand that there's stepping stones that lead up to those places. You just can't get into those automatically. So if Greg had decided when he was newer he wanted to be a detective, and he said, well, I'm going to test to be a homicide detective. It never would have happened. Never would have gone there. You gotta basically put your time in these lesser assignments, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I mean, you just can't get hired off the street to become a detective. Right. You have to pay your dues and patrol before you can go anywhere. So, but again, I was a younger officer. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn to be a better investigator. So that's why I chose to take the test to go there. Needless to say, on all these big investigations, especially the homicide, being lower on the totem pole, I always got sent to investigate or to look at the dead bodies. I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So you just imagine, here I am. It could be 4:00 in the morning. I go down to county hospital. They take you down to the basement. They take you to the morgue. You walk into this big refrigerator, and I'm talking, I don't know, 3,000 square feet or something. And inside, there's just gurneys and just lined with body bags, and there's just bodies throughout this. I mean, there could have been 50 to 100 bodies in the morgue at any time, you know. And so then they would just leave you there all by yourself. So you'd just be downstairs, away from everybody, with all these dead bodies, and then you'd have to unzip the body bag and basically look this dead body over, because you're looking for entrance wounds, exit wounds, any other type of wounds, anything under the fingernails. It was creepy. I mean, it was creepy because I just kept thinking at some point one of these body bags is going to sit up and scare the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And so needless to say, there's no way I would have been a homicide detective. I'd seen enough dead bodies in my life. I didn't want to deal with them.
Right.
And I spent my time there, and then I realized that the detective bureau wasn't the bureau for me. So I kind of went off in another direction at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reason I wanted you to bring it back up again was because I thought it was a great follow-up from the interview or the episode I did with John, because again, it's, somebody's got to do that stuff. The homicide dicks will do that as well. It's not that they don't do it. It's just that a lot of times they're busy doing a lot of other things. And so it falls to that property dick or, whoever else, that burglary dick. And there's, that's your responsibility to go to the morgue. You picture some of the scenes in the movies or a TV show, the creep factor, and multiply by 10. Because like Greg said, you're in there by yourself. Not only do you see what you see on TV, but you're smelling and you're touching things. And you're not touching and smelling live body anymore. And
there's a lot of body fluids as well, so there's a lot to it other than just all these black bags on these gurneys laying around the room.
Right.
But anyway. Yeah, so usually us property detectives at the bottom of the barrel, we ended up getting the lesser glamorous jobs when it came to the big investigations. We're not the ones that get to go to the strip club and look for, potential witnesses or suspects or anything like that,
You did that later anyway.
Yeah, so. We're at the morgue,
right.
Hanging, cold chilling, I guess you'd call it.
Oh, good. Yeah. Pardon the pun. That was good.
Oh,
that was good.
Thank you.
So I think that was a great one. I wanted to get that in there. It came up in conversation while we were chatting. I thought it'd be cool to interject in there. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's episode, Blueberry Pancakes.
Blueberry Pancakes.
Blueberry Pancakes. So at the time that this occurred, Greg and I were both sergeants. We were both working in Special Investigations Bureau, or SIB. Greg had a narcotics squad, and I had a project squad. And there's a lot of overlap. A lot of us did kind of the same things, and very frequently, we would share manpower and or management of things. Like if, let's say that Greg was gone and his squad needed to do something, I would step in and help supervise that. We all knew each other really well. Vice versa. If I was gone or tied up with something, it was not uncommon at all for Greg to say, "Hey, no problem, I'll cover this thing with you." And we loaned bodies. We did whatever we needed to do to basically get the job done. And a lot of good memories there. Greg and I had a lot of really kick-ass cases and just had a lot of good time. Again, we could go into a bunch of those stories too, but we'll stay on this one. So that's kind of what he and I were doing. So at the time of this incident or this story, I'll kind of let you start it off then, Greg.
Yeah. Like Kevin alluded to, we shared manpower or female power, however you want to look at it. I mean, I believe at the time I may have had 6 detectives working for me. Same with Kevin, and when you start doing these bigger investigations or these bigger search warrants or whatever it would be, you need more than 6 people.
Right.
So there was a lot of resources within our bureau, and we were all able to come together because we all kind of did the same job, and we all worked with each other. We all knew each other. A lot of the people in the bureau were SWAT cops. So, we'd spent time together on the SWAT team. So we all knew each other pretty well. We all knew how each other was going to react, how we were going to act, what to do. So it was good. It wasn't just, you're just picking some stranger up off the street in a patrol uniform that had no idea what was going on.
Very cohesive.
Very cohesive. So on this particular day, again, this was, I don't know, 15 years ago, probably longer. So you got to pardon my my memory here, but we had a CI, or a confidential informant, that was working with some of our detectives in the bureau at the time. So the CIs usually have 2 purposes, or they're working with us for 2 main goals. One is to make money. The department would pay them a certain percentage of the amount of drugs that the investigation led to, or maybe amount of money that was seized. They would get a certain percentage of that, or they were working off a case. They got busted for something, and then in return they were like, "Hey, we'll go snitch on somebody, and we'll introduce you to them, and then you can arrest them," and then basically they work their case off. So those are the 2 main reasons why we have CIs. Again, confidential informants. So on this particular day, we had a CI, and of course, this didn't just pop up matter of factly. It had been in the works for a couple of weeks. The CI was going to buy a pound of meth from some supposed badass guy. But of course, everybody we dealt with was supposed badasses.
Always.
Back then, a pound of meth, we're not paying retail prices here. We're paying wholesale.
Yep.
So it was probably 18 to 20 grand, I think is what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought my memory was around that 18 mark. So obviously now it's substantially less, but yeah.
Yeah, so, and back in the day, the department just wasn't willing to cough up $18,000 to go buy a pound of meth from somebody in an apartment complex. So we had to go out and shop around to find somebody that would be willing to front us some money to buy this.
Well, and let's talk about this when you talk about coming up with money. So the reason we're talking about coming up with money, or what we'd call it flash, is in order for the deal to go through, at some point or other, the money had to be shown. So if you're a bad guy and you've got, let's work on the premise of this, where you have that pound of meth and let's say we're selling it for $18K, you want to see that $18K before you bring that pound of dope out. So if there's a meeting, oftentimes there'd be a point where the suspect's like, "Yep, I got the dope. You got the cash? I got the cash." And the guy would need to flash the cash. So most times, especially when you start talking about a larger quantity, you didn't have to have that much cash because they're not going to sit there and count it bill for bill, but you needed to have a substantial pile of money. And so when we start talking about this flash, the police department, sometimes would obtain these funds from a few different places, and then we would use that as flash. Now, the big risk is that it could be lost, it could be stolen. I mean, there's a number of ways things could go that wouldn't be the right way. So that was always a consideration. And what we would have to do in some cases where we needed a larger quantity of flash money was go outside the department. And it wasn't that it was the wrong thing to do. It's just the department wasn't willing to risk the money, and we would go to typically a federal agency or a county agency, and they would be a little more willing to say, "Yep, we'll loan you this flash. We've worked with you before." A number of things had to work themselves out, but they would come up with the flash for us. So that's the whole money side of it.
Yeah, but on this particular incident, it wasn't a flash. We gave the bad guy $18,000, and we were buying the dope. We were making a case. We weren't flashing money.
Oh, and he wasn't going to get taken down afterward?
No.
Oh, see, I don't remember that. Okay, then you're right.
Yeah.
So it was walking. It was going
so the
away.
18 grand was walking. So the department was like, "No, we're not giving you $18,000 to buy a pound.
Which makes a little more sense.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
why would you do that? Why would we? Because again, the premise that I'm laying out is more of we flash it, the deal is agreed upon, things exchange hands, but then we arrest and take everybody off right then and there. What Greg's talking about is essentially we're walking that cash. We're leaving that money with the suspect and they're leaving. And why would we do that?
Well, it's to build a case. And a lot of times, we have to get, at the time, we had to go off by what the county attorney would charge. So let's just say, to make it easy, if I was buying dope from you, I walk up to you, I throw you a 20, but you hand me a rock. Well, per the county attorney, that's not enough to charge you with distribution of
sales.
So you had to make numerous buys. You had to do it more than a couple of times to show that they have the intention to do it, that they're culpable and all that other. So even though we're talking a ton of money, we're talking a ton of dope at the time, we still had to establish the case that the county attorney would want to charge with, because we just don't want to do this, arrest the person, they go to jail for 2 days and they're out again, and they're dealing the next day.
Right. And a sales charge is obviously much more serious than possession. And usually, it probably still the case is it was usually 3. They typically want to see 3 deals, 3 separate deals, separate dates, different, separate quantities, etc.
And you're right. It was 3. And back when we were working in that unit, or when I was in that unit, we weren't really concerned with the people in possession of it. We were looking more for the people that were dealing, know. So we could arrest people in possession all day long, but they're kind of like the end of the means, or whatever you want to call it. So
end user, yeah.
Yeah, so we always wanted like the bigger fish. So we would always try to work our way up the food chain. And so the users are the bottom of the food chain. We want the people like the mid-level to higher level people of the food chain to make a bigger dent than what the user is going to do. Because there's always going to be a user.
Right.
So if you can try to cut out the middleman or even higher, it makes a bigger dent.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that was the whole premise, is we're working on our investigation. We're trying to build this investigation. Obviously, the more dope that's involved, the bigger the charge is going to be. The more time, the bigger the sentence is going to be for the person. And this particular bad guy was pretty well known for being a big time dealer. He was very, very hard to get into. We tried a couple of different ways to get to him. We couldn't. I think a couple of our undercovers tried to buy from him. He wouldn't sell. So fortunately, we were able to come across this CI that knew him, that would be willing to buy from him. So we had to go that route. But the CI is kind of like, if I just can't go there and buy a rock, or I can't go there and buy a gram or an ounce or whatever. He goes, if I do it, this is what I got to do.
Got to go big.
Got to go big or go home.
Yeah.
So again, we're working on developing the case on this guy, but we don't have the money to do it.
Yeah, which it's funny because now you'd have thought I would ask that question before we got going, but it totally makes sense now why the city wouldn't cough up 18, because it wasn't a flash, it was a walk, and they were going to lose it. So it makes total sense now.
Yeah, and city's just not willing to throw out 18 grand a couple of different times to make a case on it.
Yeah, I could see that. So
they will now, but they wouldn't back in the day.
Yeah.
So we went shopping around. We found that the DEA was willing to front some money, or the money, but they had to be involved in the case, which is fine. The more the better. They have to justify why they're spending the money. They need some sort of stat or something to say that, this $18,000 netted us this or whatnot. So we were able to get a DEA agent on board, and he was able to give us 18 grand of DEA money, or our money, I guess it is in the end result.
Yeah.
Our tax money.
Yeah.
Our tax money will work.
Yeah, no kidding. There you go. There you go.
So on this particular day we had, again, this had been an accumulation of probably months of work. We had our CI ready. We had the money. We had the DEA agent there. Any drug buy that we do, there's always a briefing. Like, we always sit down with everybody involved and we go over what each officer is supposed to do, what the CI is supposed to do, what we're going to do if something goes bad, where we want people to sit, different signals, there's like a distress signal, and what was?
Well, I think we all use the same one. It's basically, hey, no need for guns or violence, which basically meant if the UC, our undercover, whether it was a cop, or the CI, whether it was not a cop, that was the phrase that they would use for us to basically, here comes the cavalry. Everything we have is coming, and it's coming right now because something is really bad. Things are not going well.
Yeah, and that's used. The CIUC, like Kevin said, that's used if all shit's hitting the fan and they need help.
Worst case scenario.
Right then and there. And then we had like a more casual type distress, and I wouldn't even say distress signal, but it was more of a casual like, hey man, things aren't really going the way I want them to go. Could you just kind of come and check on me and maybe get me out of here?
Right. So that would be
nonchalantly, more or less.
I like the term. So we'd call that like a soft contact. And so an example of that would be, say that it's, one of our guys is in there working. And so my soft contact for my squad used to be, Kevin's not going to be cool with this. And what that meant was that I needed to send, again, everything's pre-planned, but I would send usually a plainclothes person to the door or to the area of the deal or something, so that we would essentially disrupt whatever was going on, but we didn't want to do it like gangbusters, like cops coming in with guns drawn. It was more of a, hey, stuff's not quite going the way I want it to go. I just need a little bit of a disruption to maybe change the course, or to essentially give me an out to back out of this without people knowing who I am. So that was kind of a soft contact. But Greg's soft contact was almost always the same, which was
blueberry pancakes,
which would always make us laugh. And that came to us from guys way before us.
Yeah. I'm sure one of these days he'll be on your show, but it came from him. He was my field training officer. We're still good friends, but he used that one a lot. And it needed to be something that you're not going to say in the normal conversation.
Right.
So it's got to be something that you can't accidentally say. It's got to be something that where you got to work into a sentence, and it's still ordinary, but it's still unordinary enough that it's just not going to come out for no reason.
Right.
So we used blueberry pancakes, and so again, you sat through hundreds of these briefings as much as I did, or put on hundreds of these briefings as much as I did, but.
Sure.
But I mean, you go over all this kind of stuff. You go over who's the arrest team. You go over what channel we're going to be on, and where we want certain people, and who's going to go if the distress signal pops up. Who's kicking in the door? Who's going to be the first one in the door? Who's going to be the second one? You go through all these, any scenario you can think of, you go through.
Right.
And you could be in these briefings for an hour and a half. I mean, it just, because you always got to plan for the worst.
Right.
Because you never know what's going to happen once you get in. And in this particular incident, we were going to the bad guy's apartment, which isn't ideal. We don't like doing that. We like to be the ones that set everything up. We like to be the ones that pick the location. We want to be the ones that are in control. We don't want to let the bad guy control where we're going, what we're doing, how we're doing it. It's always on our terms.
Right. And I've talked about this in episodes before that, again, you're exactly right. We want to set up and manage and be the ones that control that point of contact, or that place that we meet. So I'm totally with Greg. I wouldn't have dug that too much either. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And especially on these larger deals, we're a little more flexible. That's where we would talk about other issues about, medical support. Sometimes we would actually have the station that was closest to that place would essentially take them, talking about the hose dragger station, take themselves out of service so that if something bad happened, they would immediately be able to respond to our location. So I don't recall specifically, but on a deal that was this big and with the money and the dope that was involved, we probably did that. A lot of the other things we would talk about is we would identify the closest hospitals. We would identify just anything and everything that could possibly go wrong. You would try to have the counter to it. We would also, is a big topic and one we'd get into arguments about, is we talk about tripping. Like if the deal was starting, and then a lot of times what these guys would do is they'd want to trip or they want to go to another location. The problem was then we're not set up. So we would have, some pretty heated discussions sometimes about, is the detective and or the CI, are they going to be allowed or given the okay to trip to a new location, which was usually not. But anyway, so it just gives you an idea of the depth and the detail that we would have to put into these briefings. And the other big rule that we always had that I to this day don't believe we've ever deviated, or we never deviated from, was if you weren't at the briefing, you couldn't participate in the operation. Because a lot of times, there were just certain pieces of information that you had to be aware of. And if you weren't and you tried to jump into the middle of this thing, you could completely jam the works up. So that was always a big deal as well, is that you had to be at the briefing if you were going to participate in this operation. So,
yep, you're absolutely right. And again, we don't, we do some we would do some drug buys where we didn't have to go through this planning. Like it was simple. Like you would pull up in your car, the deal would be, the bad guy would walk up, deal would be done. You might have a cover team right there just in case. But when you start talking about going to somebody's apartment, you're talking about a pound of meth, you're talking about $18,000. This was a little bit bigger than our average. What we were kind of doing on an everyday basis, because we were doing buys every day,
right?
But not to this scale.
Well, the other thing I'll throw out, Greg, is that, when you're working with a CI versus a UC, like I know, like I just had, Brian was on my last episode. I know exactly how Brian works because I've covered his buys literally hundreds of times. I know the inflection in his voice. I know words that he uses. I know things that tell me if something's going right or wrong. When you start dealing with like a CI, like in this incident, we don't know them as well. So we don't know how they're going to react. We don't know if they're going to, basically lose their mind if something starts going south. We just don't know a lot of those things. So it heightens the level of preparation, anxiety, and basically everything else, because we just don't know how these folks are going to react like we do our own narcs.
Absolutely. And again, I worked with Brian for a couple of years too, and he's like the epitome of an undercover cop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But what I always tried to do as well was I would meet, and we tried not to let the CI interact with a bunch of our undercover cops, because the CI might become a suspect later on down the road in a whole different deal. So the less that the CI knows about us, the better. So we would always try to keep the CI away from as much cop stuff as we could.
Right.
But I would always meet with the CI and then the handler. So whoever was in control of the CI, one of the detectives, the detective and I and the CI would meet. I could go over, I could talk to him, I could kind of get a feel for him. But again, it may be 15 minutes, so you get an idea, but you don't get a very good idea how these people are. And like you said, they could get stressed out easy, they could fly off the handle easy. A lot of times they were drug users anyway, so you didn't know how they were going to act. So you did your best. You did your best with what you're dealt. So this day, we had everything figured out. We knew the apartment we were going to. The apartment was in a really crappy spot. We couldn't have somebody watching the front door. It was like in an apartment complex. There was like 3 or 4 buildings that all faced an interior courtyard. It was on the 3rd floor. It was just in probably one of the worst spots you could ever want when you're doing a drug deal inside of an apartment. It's not like we could come busting in the back door. The front door is the only way to go in. We had an undercover go scout the apartment. We knew where it sat, the front window, the front door, like we had a basic layout of the apartment, all that kind of stuff. We were doing everything that could be done at the time to make sure that this goes down all right. The CI was a little freaked out, I remember, because he's like, this is a bad dude. The bad guy was supposedly a bad dude. He was kind of freaked out about it a little bit, kind of scared, but he was willing to go through with it. So normally as a supervisor in charge of the scene, I'm going to sit with the arrest team. So we're sitting in an undercover vehicle. I should back up just a second or just a minute. The CI is going to go into this apartment with a listening device. So just to talk about listening devices a little bit. When I was in narcotics, I was in charge of the detective that handled all the listening devices. And so maybe every 2-3 years we would spend $20,000 to upgrade our listening devices, because there was always a better version of what was out there. And these listening devices, the companies would be like, nobody can listen. Nobody has the radio band. Nobody can listen to it on a scanner. They can't be, they're encrypted. Only you're going to be able to listen to it. There's devices where the cats meow. You buy it, you buy ours, you buy ours, you buy ours.
Well, like anybody's going to do. They're trying to make it sound like their product's the best. It's better than what you had. I always remember the big thing that they'd sold on too was the batteries last longer. They're more dependable. They won't drop out, which dropouts are a huge problem. So again, they're trying to sell us a product, and you try to keep up on top of that stuff as the best you can.
Yeah. And if I remember right, we had just upgraded all of our listening devices too. Like they were all within a month old. And I know we spent a ton of money on it because my boss was kind of upset that we spent that much money. But it's all for safety reasons,
Right.
So anyway, so we get all set up. As a supervisor, I'm sitting with the arrest team. The arrest team was mostly a bunch of your folks because they're SWAT cops. They're all in their getup. They're all ready to go. They have their police shirts on. They have their bulletproof vests on. They have their helmets handy. Again, if the distress signal comes out, these 5 guys are the ones that are going to go save the CI. They're going to bust the door down. They're going to go save the guy. So we all get there. We all get set up long before the CI ever shows up. So we're sitting in the parking lot. I don't remember what time of year it was. I don't remember it being that hot, so we didn't have to deal with sweating our balls off. I don't think it was
too hot.
I think it was halfway pleasure. I wouldn't say pleasurable, but
decent.
It was bearable.
Yeah.
But then we had separate undercover cops individually sitting in different locations throughout the parking lot in case something moved to a different area, in case bad guys went somewhere, the CI went somewhere with the bad guy.
Well, and sometimes it was counter surveillance.
Right.
Because you start talking about a larger deal like this, there weren't a lot of times, but there are a few times where if you're the bad guy, you would bring a buddy or two over and you would tell them, hey, cruise the lot and make sure you don't see anything that doesn't look right. Because if you see something that's funky, give me a call because it's probably the cops. So those singles, as I used to call them, those guys had an important role. They had to watch for counter. And a lot of times we'd keep those guys plainclothes because they were the guys that if something was looking funky or we just needed someone to go look at stuff, you'd say, hey, Joe, jump out on foot, go check out XYZ and tell me what you see.
Yeah.
Something like that. So again, like Greg said, there was so much planning that went into all that stuff. Again, contingency for everything. And I actually want to comment a little bit on, Greg talked about, when things go to complete hell and, in this case, it was those 5 guys that are totally, decked out, geared up, long guns, ready to go and, save the world. I used to tell my UCs, not so much the CIs because I don't think they would have understood it, but, if something truly goes bad, we're not going to be able to save you. We truly are not going to be able to save you. If we can intervene as things are spiraling out of control, that's okay. But, you listen to some of these undercover guys, and this never happened to me, but you have some of these guys that'll talk about having a gun pulled on them and pointed at their head or something. They can give all the distress signals they want, but the bottom line fact of the matter is that if the bad guys want to kill them, they're going to kill them. We're not going to stop it. Now, luckily, that very, very rarely happens, and these UC guys are good, and they're talkers, and they can talk their way out. And, if it was me, I'm going to say all these things that I need to say because I know in the back of my mind I've given the distress signal, and, man, the cavalry's coming. I just got to stall a little bit longer. So, I do want to put that out there that it's not quite like the movies and stuff. We're very rarely in the next room with an explosive charge on the wall that as soon as something goes bad, boom, we're coming through a wall. They got to be good. And if you're a good UC, you understand that. And, the CIs, again, not quite as much. Usually wasn't quite as brutally honest with them, but I still would say, hey, understand, we can't get there that second. It's going to take us a little bit,
right. And I want to say, again, this apartment was in the worst spot it could be.
Yeah.
So I mean, best case scenario, it was 3 to 5 minutes before we would have busted in that door. I mean, you
think that long?
Well, maybe not. Maybe
I don't think so. From what I remember, I think you guys had it planned out.
Maybe a couple minutes.
So 120 seconds?
Well, you're thinking, you're talking big SWAT cops, muscle heads, with all their gear on,
Well,
trying to run up 3 flights.
Saying they can't run?
Well, I'm just saying up 3 flights of stairs. Come on.
It's true. No, that's true. And that could be a realistic number. So, regardless, let's say that.
Yeah, even if it's a minute.
Yeah, let's say it's 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Holy hell. A lot can take place in 60 seconds.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I just wanted to tack that on there because, it's a great point, and I want people to understand just how dangerous it is, especially when, these folks do this and they risk their lives.
Right. So we had the DEA agent was there. He was by himself. He was kind of sitting off in the corner of the parking lot. DEA's not, at least this agent wasn't as set up for like undercover work. He kind of had like a Chevy Monte Carlo with dash lights and, he looked like a cop car.
Right.
So we had this poor guy sitting off, like 2 blocks away, all by himself. But the other singles and we all had, we called him a number 7 at the time. It was just like a little handheld radio, but it monitored the listening device. Right. So, you test the listening device, you make sure the CI, when he talked, we could hear what was being said. Everybody would be like, yep, we can hear him, all's good. So everything was in place. All we needed was the CI to show up, go up to the room, apartment, make the deal, come back, boom, everything's hunky-dory. So we're all sitting there. CI shows up, goes upstairs. You can hear him knock on the door. When he knocks, he walks in and he makes a comment. He's like, "Oh, I see you have friends here." And we never directed him whatsoever to say anything like that, but it was good on our behalf because now we know there's more than one person in this apartment.
Right. That's something that we'd expect our UCs to think about and do.
Right.
Give us intel through the listening device, like Greg's saying. So yeah, great on him. But not such a great feeling to hear.
Well, and then I think, and I could be wrong on this, but I think he makes some sort of comment like, "What's he holding, or what does he have?" And somebody said, "Oh, it's a police scanner." And so now our hackles go up just a little bit because we're thinking, okay, there's more people in the apartment than, we didn't know how many to expect anyway, but now they're hinked up a little bit because one dude has a police scanner.
Right.
So now we're thinking, hopefully our police radios aren't being, we always keep our police talk between cars and everything to a minimum anyway when we're doing these things.
Right.
Because there's a lot going on in being the supervisor, there's a lot going on in that main vehicle that you have to pay attention to. So we always tell our detectives, try to stay off the radio as much as possible unless you absolutely need to.
Right.
So now we're hinked up, or our hackles go up because like, the dude's got a scanner, so now they're a little more paranoid. And then the bad guy, they do some common like, "Hey, what's going on, blah 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 blah, let's go in the back room." So they go in the back bedroom, shut the door. So they're in there talking. And needless to say, these high-dollar listening devices, they weren't working very well.
Well, they always cut out at the worst possible moment.
So they're talking, and then all of a sudden, there's nothing. And then they're talking, and then there's nothing. So now you're thinking, okay, well, we need to be on our A game because who knows what's being said in between.
Right.
So there's a little conversation going on, and then all of a sudden there's a knock on the bedroom door. And a guy comes in, I'm assuming the guy holding the scanner, because he goes, "Hey, I can hear your conversation on my scanner." And so I'm thinking, oh shit, this isn't good.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm relying on the CI. I haven't heard blueberry pancakes. I haven't heard anything come out of his mouth. Like, he plays it off like nothing. Like,
but you're also missing part of the conversation.
Oh yeah, but I heard this part clear as day.
Right.
And then I remember the CI basically going, "I don't know, man. I don't know what the hell's going on." Like, he played it off like a champ. And then bad guy goes apeshit. He's just like, he's freaked out. He's like, "Take your shirt off." So, our CI takes his shirt off. "Take your shoes." Like, he's yelling at him. So it ends up the CI is standing there in this bedroom butt naked.
Because he stripped him down looking for
the listening device.
Right.
So there's two bad guys, or the bad guy, the guy with the scanner, and our CI in this back bedroom. And so there's all this commotion going on. You can tell that the bad guy is like amped up, like he is going ballistic. And you know, the CI's keeping us cool, so they're talking, then we couldn't hear anything that was going on. And then 30 seconds later it popped back up. And then so you're kind of like trying to listen to the inflections of the voices and try to listen to like what's being said, like the conversation going on between the two.
Right.
You know, is it heated? Is it chill? How's the CI acting? Is he all amped up?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to, meantime, back at Metropolis, again, like I told you, we trade bodies. We did all these things. Well, I remember for this particular deal, I remember that day I had some kind of paperwork I needed to push around. And so I was like, you know, Greg, you good? You got this thing? He's like, yep, I got it. No problem. Just as long as I can use your guys. And so I had briefed, but I didn't go out there with them. And I was sitting in my office pushing paper. And I remember, I believe it was our lieutenant at the time. He either came down the hallway because my office was on the other side of the building, or he just called me on the intercom or whatever. And he basically says, those guys are about to do a hostage rescue out there. So I think you better get out there. So of course, you know, I go from doing some menial paper pushing to going, oh shit, you know, things are about to hit the fan, like bad. And because again, these things don't happen hardly ever. I mean, this is a very, very rare situation. So of course, you know, I throw the radio on, click to their channel, you know, grab my stuff, run out to my UC car, had a van at the time, and I just start blasting out there. Well, it was right about it was maybe a little bit before where I cut Greg off was when I started hearing how things were going. And yeah, it didn't sound good at all. I mean, it sounded really bad. I mean, when you've got a bad guy stripping your CI down, that's not a good thing. Because my other thought was, I didn't know where or how, what device we happened to be using at the time, if it was going to be found on a strip or if it wasn't going to be. So, you know, I'm thinking, holy crap, I could literally hear at any second and hear these guys say, we're going right now. So I'm flying out there, trying to get out there, thinking about a million things. But the bottom line was, you know, I had to remember, even though, you know, Greg and I are essentially, we're both sergeants. We both kind of carry the same responsibilities of management. It's his gig. I mean, it's Greg's deal. Like, if Greg briefed it, it's his deal. I have to defer to him. You know, I have to make sure that I don't step on his toes and let him handle this deal. So I get out there. So probably right about when I cut Greg off is when I come into the parking lot. And again, you know, you can't come flying in there because you're going to screw stuff up. But I get in the parking lot. I find a good spot to park that I'm fairly close to where we'd have to go running up the stairs, and just basically start grabbing my stuff and throwing my gear on, you know, my vest, and grabbing my long gun and all that kind of stuff. And again, thinking that any second they're going to give the go, you know, hey, we're going. And the one thing I don't recall, which drove me nuts because I'm pretty sure this was, I don't think I had a 7. And so I was not getting the information off of the device. All I was getting was what people were saying on the police radio, which was driving me nuts because I just didn't know what was going on. You know, as a boss or as a supervisor, you thrive on information. You need every little tiny tidbit of info to help you make the decision you're going to make, you know, because a lot of times it's truly life or death. What decision you make dictates whether people get hurt or they don't. So for me, even though I know it's Greg's gig, man, I sure would have liked to hear all that stuff that was going on, you know?
No, you didn't.
Oh my God. So that's where everything got me back into it. So I got in the parking lot and I'm throwing gear on, expecting at any second that we're going to get the go sign. And my mindset was, this is going to be a hostage rescue, or it's going to be a CI rescue, basically. That's where I was at with it, because it sure sounded like that to me.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sitting in the front of this minivan, and you know, I have five guys in there with me. They were dressed for the most part. Well, as this is progressing, they're putting their helmets on. Yeah, they're putting their goggles on. You know, like they're tightening their boots. Like they're getting ready to go, and they keep saying, they keep harping, when are we going? Should we go now? How about now? How about now? And, you know, here I am listening to these 5 guys chirp at me. I'm trying to listen to the 7. I'm trying to think in my head, okay, so far everything's cool. I haven't heard blueberry pancakes. I haven't heard, you know,
no need for guns or violence.
Yeah. Well, then I have the DEA agent, he doesn't have one of our police radios, so he's calling me on the phone like, we need to go rescue. So now I'm on the phone with this guy. There's 5 guys chirping at me. I'm trying to listen to the 7, and then I'd get off the phone with the DEA guy, and then my boss would call me, and he'd be like asking me 50 questions on what the hell's going on, and I was just like, let me do my fucking job here and quit calling me. Yeah. You're like, because the more you're talking to me, the less I am focused on what's going on here. Yeah. So
you don't got enough going on as it is, right?
Right. No. And then I have other guys, singles. Hey, should I get my gear on? And of course, they weren't supposed to have. There was never any sort of intention for them to put gear on to come with the help with the rescue if it went that direction.
Right.
But they're all amped up. So all this is going on, and I'm trying to listen to the tone of these voices going on this 7, which was working about a third of the time.
Right.
So all this is going on. So what I did was I asked one of the singles, hey, get out of your car. If the coast is clear, get out of your car. Nonchalantly just walk through the courtyard of the apartment. I just kind of want to get a feel for what's going on. And this detective this UC he had a lot of experience, so he wasn't like, Mr. Hinky walking down the sidewalk or anything like that.
And they looked the part. Our guys looked the part.
Yeah, so I was just kind of like, hey, just do a casual walk by. I just want to get a feel for what's going on.
Because you're grasping at every little bit of information you can get.
Absolutely.
By the second.
And I don't want to initiate a rescue if I don't need to.
Right. Well, and I think that's a great point. So let's talk about that, because I think that if you're like an average citizen that listens to this, you're thinking, well, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, better safe than sorry. Why would you not send the cavalry in to intervene in this issue? And it's very simple. The answer is, well, we may end up getting the guy killed. We may end up forcing this into something that it wasn't going to be by doing that. So, again, I could spin off into a whole bunch of other stories, but the bottom line is that a lot of times in law enforcement, doing too much is often the worst thing to do. Sometimes you do need to just lay back and watch things unfold and wait for that additional information. Because if we act too soon, take this situation. Let's say that things are unfolding. People are jacked up, man. Those guys, their anxiety level is high, extremely high. The next thing they know, they got a bunch of cops dressed in black with guns that are banging and slamming on the door. And the next thing you know, some guy pulls a gun and shoots the guy. Because it's just, you forced them into a corner. People panic and they do goofy things. So that's the reason that you can't. Again, Greg's predicament is a tough one, because you got to weigh those things out fractions of a second, just over and over and over and over and over. And the follow, again, having been in that position where you got all those guys harping at you, you got your boss calling you, you got dudes telling you need to go, dudes telling you need to do this or that or whatever. I used to tell my guys, and it takes a while to get this, but sometimes you just got to be a grunt. And by saying that, what I meant, and they would know what I meant, was sometimes you just got to listen and follow orders. You got to keep your mouth shut. You got to trust in your supervision, and you just go when you got to go. But especially if you're a boss, you totally get it. You get being bothered to the point of where it's such a huge distraction, you're not able to do your job as well. So at that point, at least for me, I was just a grunt. And all I'm doing is listening for Greg. I can think a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm just listening for Greg to basically say, we're going or nothing. And unless you can correct me, I don't think I got on the radio at all, except for the time that I said I'm basically in the lot.
Yeah, I mean, there came a point in time when I think I had the UC out walking around, where finally I just put my phone down, like in the map pocket of the door, and I didn't answer it again.
Yeah, you just mute it.
And then I turned to your folk, and I mean, they were as much as my folk. I mean, we were all friends. They all understood. There was respect. I just basically turned around to them and I just told them to shut the hell up.
Yeah.
I just told them, it's important for me to be able to listen to this thing. I needed to listen to the 7. I didn't have to explain it to them. I turned around, told them to shut up. They shut up.
They get it.
They know.
Yeah.
So it seemed like hours while the UC was out walking around checking things out. Again, still conversation going on the 7, cutting in and out, not really hearing a whole lot. It seemed like it was getting worse as time progressed,
Of course.
Then the UC comes back and he's like, hey, I went out, walked around. I didn't even go up on the third floor. I stayed on the bottom, by the pool. The minute I walked by, some guy walked out of the apartment and started following me. So now I'm thinking, wow, these guys are hinked up.
Yeah.
Like they're jacked up.
Yeah.
Again, now I'm kind of processing what you were saying. If we go when we don't need to go, what's going to happen? Now we know there's at least 4 people in the apartment. We have the bad guy, the CI, the guy with the scanner, and now the 4th guy that came out and followed the UC around. So now we know there's 4 people, and they're all pretty hinked up. So I'm just like, we can't go unless I hear the signal, because somebody's going to get hurt or something bad. You just have that gut feeling every now and then, like something bad is going to happen when we bust that door down.
Right.
If we bust the door down.
I hate to say it, but that gut feeling is kind of all you got to go on. And sometimes, and I think that if a gut feeling is basically a decision made on your experience with a whole bunch of things that happened before. But I think you still kind of quantify it a little bit as a gut feeling. Just it's not a particular thing. It's a number of things come together with your experience, with the things you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, walking on. It just says this is what I need to do, or this is what I shouldn't do. So
yeah, and it's weird. I think in police work we a lot of officers worry about the Monday morning quarterback. Like what are people going to look at this? No matter how the scenario turns out, it's going to be scrutinized. But a lot of people worry about what the outcome's going to be before the outcome shows up.
Yeah.
I never worried about that. I always held to my beliefs. Like what I'm doing right now is what I feel is the best. And if somebody wants to rip it apart later on, then
so be it.
I'll be able to explain it. So I stick by my beliefs. I don't worry about what I think other people are thinking. So again, this goes on, and I think we talked about it before. I said, "Oh yeah, I think this whole thing lasted about 5 minutes." And you're like, "Well, Greg, I drove from the office all the way down there. I got all my gear on. It was at least 20 minutes." So I'm thinking 25 minutes maybe.
Yeah, I'll bet it was.
It seemed like 3 minutes.
Well, and me with getting my gear on, it takes me.
Well, yeah, you gotta put your little mat out so you can stand on it, and then
I couldn't get out of the van, unfortunately. So, but yeah, if I had to throw a time on it, I'd say 20-25 minutes.
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like that.
Yeah, I'm sure it didn't.
So anyway, again, the 7's cutting in and out. I can hear little bits and pieces of this conversation. There was nothing said like IHOP or Village Inn, that you would put with blueberry pancakes,
right,
or anything like that.
Right.
There was no mention of violence whatsoever. The CI was a cool, calm cat. Like you could never feel like an inflection in his voice, which I think probably saved his ass, to be honest with you. So I was just kind of like, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything. We're going to wait. And then all of a sudden, conversation stopped, and the handler, the CI's handler, gets a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, it's the CI." He's like, "Yeah, I'm back in my car. We're good to go." And we never heard the bad guy. We never heard the CI leave because the bug cut out, And then obviously once the CI leaves the apartment, you're not going to hear anything anyway, because they're not talking anymore. You know what I mean? So even if it was still working, we didn't hear anything. So it was just kind of talking, cuts out. 3 minutes later, the CI calling up the handler, the detective in charge of him, says, "Hey, I got your pound of meth. Where do you want to meet?" And I'm thinking in my head, this bad guy's a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? Because here he is. You could hear the conversation that they're having on the scanner.
Right.
And he still sells the freaking pound of meth.
Right.
You're like, you're a dumb. No wonder you're going to get caught later down the road. You're a dumbass.
Yeah, but he wasn't. That was the thing that you got to remember, because remember, he was actually fairly smart dude. Because he wouldn't buy from a couple of UCs, because I remember some of the stuff that led up. But it just goes to show you the power of greed. Because that guy saw $18K and he went, "Ooh, I really could use that. And he finally, again, against any normal, logical person, if you or I were in that same situation, we would have backed out of it for sure. We'd have been like, there's something drastically wrong here, you know? I mean, of course we would have seen that. So,
yeah. And so kind of at that point, everybody, you could hear just a big sigh of relief come over the entire parking lot, not just in the van, but I could hear it from the DEA agent 4 blocks away. You know, like you could just hear everybody go, oh, and it was like right after that, I want to say my phone rings and I pick up and it's our boss. You need to come see me in the office. And I'm like, well, I got other shit to do right now. Yeah. I'll come talk to you when I get there. And you basically like click because I didn't need to. I didn't need to do. I didn't need to listen to his bullshit at the time anyway.
No.
Yeah. So I go over and the CI and the handler, you know, they're off in a parking lot. And I basically asked everybody else to go to a different parking lot, kind of get dressed down, and then we're just going to kind of meet up and talk about the whole thing.
So we do a debrief. You do a debrief, and especially in something like this, where it was this wacky, you got to have a debrief because you got people with different bits and pieces of the story, and you really want to keep people from spinning out of control and telling the wrong story, and just as a matter of learning from it too. So you got to debrief something like this, and you got to do it like right now.
Yeah, you can't let people go off and start doing other things because then you're only going to end up with a third of the crew.
You'll never get them all together.
Yeah, again. So I was just, you know, we were just like go get undressed, chill out, get something to drink or whatever. Then we're going to meet over in a parking lot or whatever. So I go over and I meet with the CI and the handler, and the CI thanks me up and down, and I'm like, dude, what are you thanking me for? He's like, if you would have busted through that door, he would have killed me. He's like, thank you for not coming through that door because it would have been over.
Yeah.
You know, it's just bizarre. Like I actually just got
goosebumpy.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of like, you know, like you just talked about, like we could have made things worse by busting through the door.
Yeah.
You know, but the CI was just like, that's the craziest thing that I ever went through. And I mean, he was still in his underwear when I met with him. Like he basically put his underwear on and walked out of the apartment.
Oh God!
You know, jumped in his car because he was freaked out.
Oh, I can imagine.
And we were kind of like, dude, get dressed. It's a little uncomfortable right now.
Right.
You know, so he gets dressed. You know, we get the pound of meth, and you know, we're kind of like, we shake his hand. We're like, good job, man. You know, I mean, again, we don't want to blow smoke up his ass or anything. You know, you got to keep it on a professional level.
Sure.
And so then I go over to where everybody else is and we just kind of talk about it. And I just remember there were a couple singles that were upset. Like they were like, what the hell were you thinking? You know, and that's what's always nice about when we were doing these debriefs, especially like in our groups.
Yeah.
We didn't worry about command. Like we didn't worry about, I was your boss, you were my boss.
Right.
It was what everybody thought. There were years and years and years of experience in this group of people.
Right.
So you weren't going to hurt my feelings. I wasn't going to hurt anybody else's feelings. But we always were very truthful and forthcoming. You know, like we didn't sugarcoat anything.
No.
You know, and so you know there were a couple of guys like, what the hell were you thinking? And so, you know, in my defense, I was just kind of like, this is what I heard. This is what I saw. This is what, you know, this was my thought process. This is why I did it.
Right.
I don't care if you guys don't like, and they knew that nothing's going to change at that point. You know,
No.
I mean, maybe they could enlighten me on something that I didn't know about, but that should have been done at the time. Like they shouldn't be telling me crap afterward that would have made a difference in my decision making. And you know that as well as I do.
Oh yeah.
But then after what they heard from my point of view, they're all like, you got some balls, man. You got some balls, but good job.
Right.
You know?
Well, because again, you know, in these situations, there is one person that's making that call. And in that one, it was Greg. And so you have, you know, you got a lot of people. It's really, really easy to say what you think should happen but not be the person that makes it happen. When you're the person that makes it happen, that's a huge responsibility, and you're it. It's either you do or you don't. Again, you can talk about it, and thank God, the vast majority of the things that happened with us, with a few exceptions, at the end of it, it worked out okay. And so it's really easy to justify your actions then if things work out. It's when the things didn't work out okay, and then if it's Greg or I or whoever, and you say, well, these are all the things that I was thinking. I get now that it didn't quite go that way, but you know what? Somebody's got to make the call.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to make the decision, and you do it, and you hope it's the right thing.
Well, and again, we kind of touched on it beforehand that we try to run through every scenario possible to plan for. You have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Anything that you think could go wrong, you plan for. We never planned on anything like this happening.
Right.
Because we were sold a bill of goods that said nobody will have this frequency other than you.
Yeah.
So if it, obviously there were phone calls made back to that manufacturer later on, and everything got sorted out because they were flabbergasted that the scanner was picking it up as well.
Right.
But it was kind of funny because you learn from these things. So from then on out, we're kind of like, well, if for some reason the listening device gets picked up, this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So granted, at the time, it was a stressful deal, but we learned from it. We moved on to it. And now you could make a contingency for that as well. Because before that, it never happened.
Right.
We'd never had that problem before.
Right.
But
that's why you never say never. And I'm sure that when it happened, you didn't sit there for 5 minutes thinking, well, gosh, I just don't get it. I just can't understand. I guarantee you it was about 2 seconds of you going, shit, that's not supposed to happen, and then you keep moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
You just keep working.
Yeah, you can't dwell on it.
No, not at all.
It is what it is. You're not going to change it. You're not going to go up and knock on the door and say, hey, why don't you give this to Fred, and tell Fred to give me the other thing back. You're not going to do that. You gotta live with what you're dealt with.
That's it.
And that's it, and again, you kind of talked about this in one of your previous episodes, the accident, the burglars up at the bar, and then they fled, and then they ran into the UPS truck, T-boned them.
Oh yeah.
And you're en route to the scene. You're like the highest ranking officer in the city of Tempe at the time.
Yep.
There's all these decisions you have to make, and it's not just, like you said, you're driving, you're listening to the KDT, you're having to think about traffic, you're thinking about how officers are acting. There's all this stuff that you have to think about, and we're everyday people. We're everyday normal people.
Right.
For a lot of people, they get stressed out if they're missing a deadline, or they're late to kids' soccer practice, or they haven't eaten by 5 o'clock at night.
Right.
We're normal people. I guess some of us can take in information a little bit better than others, like can decipher and be overwhelmed a little bit better than others. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else. I'm just saying that for some reason we have the ability to take on more information, and it seems like we can make a better decision, even being overloaded. You know what I mean?
Well, I think you learn. I think you learn, and you learn how to, because you have to. You have no choice. I don't get to have a driver like the hose draggers do. Okay?
I don't know why you're bagging on the hose dragger.
Okay, first of all, I haven't done that at all this episode. I'm just throwing it out there. But yeah, no, I totally get it. I don't want to digress too much, but I always remember when we talk about this I remember much, much shorter. We were trying to get a guy. I had a crew out there. He was a really bad dude. We waited for hours. We went into overtime. We had information that the guy, was armed and on. And I finally, at the end of the night, I bagged it. I says, we're done. And so just like you were talking about, everybody's like, damn it. We know he's in there. Let's finish it off. And I just said, there's just something that's not right. And, come to find out later on, we got the guy later. We regrouped the next day, and something happened. And then I think we were talking to the girlfriend, and the girlfriend, if I remember correctly, was basically said, yeah, he was high as a kite, and he had a shotgun that was basically sitting right next to him on the bed. And he, they're all hinked up. He said the same thing. He said, man, I'll blast anybody that comes near this door. And that's just his mindset. So it's the exact same thing. As a boss, you've got to take all the information in. It ain't a popularity contest, It's like I used to tell the guys, this ain't a democracy, and you make the call and you do what you got to do. And thank goodness, like I said, the vast, vast majority of the time it works out.
Yeah.
So
you just can't, again, not us anymore, but the public safety realm gets Monday morning quarterbacked.
Anything you do.
All the time now.
Absolutely.
And so it's just kind of nice to be able to show or tell people how sometimes we don't make the best decisions, but at the time it is the best decision.
Right.
Because it's information overload. Like there could be so much happening that at the time, this looks like the best thing to do, but then tomorrow or the next day, it may not be the best thing to do.
Maybe it weren't.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to deal with it right then and there. You can't put it off till tomorrow.
Right. We can't table it.
Right. Because
can't table
there's lives there's lives in danger, right. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it's not like that all the time, but it is like that. It can get like that quite a bit, and people just don't. Frequently. I just don't think people have a concept of that.
No, and I don't think they do either, which again is kind of part of the podcast goal. But the flip side of that is we can't do nothing, because if you want to stay safe for both sides involved, well, then we'd never leave. We'd never go to work. So
we would never leave the police station. No,
you'd never leave the station. We'd hang out and watch TV and sit in Lazy Boys, and sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, watch on demand.
Anyway, so that's what I try to tell people too, is because then people are like, well, why you don't do it then? Why is it don't do that dangerous work? Well, you pay us a lot of money, and we have a job to do, and that's our job. That's our job, to take these nasty, dangerous, foul people off the street, and that's what you got to do. So. Yeah, it's an odd dichotomy, but
yeah, but the thing is we like it. Like,
oh God, yeah,
I enjoy it.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't trade that career for anything.
Best job I ever had.
Absolutely.
Okay, so which one was better?
What do you mean? Which one?
You know exactly what I mean. PD or FD?
Well, it depends.
Okay, I'm going to stop, because you're going to get yourself in big trouble if you answer that. So I am going to stop that. It depends
how you weigh it.
I am going to stop that, because I love you and I do not want you to put yourself in that position. Anything else on the story, Greg?
Nope. I think we covered that one.
I think we took care of it good. Well, hey folks, with that, I close another episode of I Barely Got Here. I really want to thank you for listening, and if you like the show, please subscribe and post a review, and ask your friends and family to give it a listen as well. If you have any questions or comments, you can shoot me an email at ibarelygothere@gmail.com, and you can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. And with that, Sam 42,
Zebra 41
will be 10-7.
Later, Professor.